Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bree's Practical English podcast. So happy to have you here today. This is the podcast where you learn English while you listen to me talk about whatever pops into my head. So today I want to talk about something that I find fascinating, and I've had so many discussions with my friends and family because it just blows my mind. And what we're talking about today is the internal monologue. Internal monologue. Have you heard about this? So, most people have an internal monologue. What is that? Well, it's the voice in your head that you hear. So, when I think, I can hear my own voice. And if I read a book, I can hear the characters' voices. Even if I don't know what they sound like, I can make up a voice. For example, if I'm reading a detective story, I can imagine the voice of the detective. Maybe he has a scruffy, deep, manly voice, and he's a smoker. And so he's got a little bit of a raspy voice. I can hear that voice that I imagined in my head. And when I have daily thoughts, I hear my own voice. Now, I'm wondering if you guys who are listening to this can hear your own voice in your head, your internal monologue. Some people call it an internal dialogue. Apparently, not everyone has an internal monologue. Some people cannot hear their own voice in their head. That's crazy to me. I talked about this with my friends and my husband. My husband and his mother both cannot hear their own voices in their heads. And that just baffles me because I don't know how they think. Because when I think, I'm hearing my own voice. So when I was explaining this to my husband, I said, in TV shows where the character isn't saying anything out loud, and yet the audience can hear their voice, we are hearing their internal monologue. But he thought that since the audience needs to know what's happening, it's kind of like a technique that people use in TV shows or movies to let the audience know what's happening. And I said, no, that's really how people think. That's how I think. I hear my own voice in my head when I'm thinking. And another example is when sometimes on TV or in movies, the character will be thinking something in their head and then suddenly they say something out loud. My husband couldn't understand why that would happen. But for me, that happens to me sometimes. So I'll be thinking something in my head, in my own voice, and then sometimes it slips out loud. Does that happen to you guys? It seems that most people have an internal monologue. It may vary in how much you hear a voice in your head. It could be all the time. It could be a little bit less. But some people have zero sound in their head, which is so interesting. And I'm curious because, for example, if I read an email or if I read a letter from someone, I can hear their voice in my head. And so people who can't hear anything, so how do they remember people's voices? How can they get a song stuck in their head, right? Are you guys with me? If you are one of the few people who doesn't have an internal monologue, please leave it in the comments and describe how you think, especially about remembering people's voices. So, for example, my grandpa passed away when I was in high school, and I spent a lot of time with him when I was a kid. And I can remember his voice. I hear it. If I remember it, I can hear it. I hear it in my head. But how would you remember somebody's voice? Or wouldn't you? Would you just forget? Of course, things fade over time, but I still can pull up that memory and hear his voice. Also, I'm really curious about getting a song stuck in your head. So when I get a song stuck in my head, I can hear the song, I hear the music, and I hear the vocals. I hear the singer singing the song. It's like on repeat in my head. But if you can't hear voices in your head, what does it mean for you if you get a song stuck in your head? Or has that never happened to you? Another thing that is really, really interesting is some people can't see images in their mind. So if I close my eyes, I can picture an apple. I can see an apple. I can see it as a real apple, or I could change it to a drawing of an apple. I can see the apple in my mind. But some people can't see anything. And that is also mind-blowing because I have a very good friend. I've known her going on 5 or 6 years. And just the other day, I learned that she cannot see things in her mind. And she's been with her husband for 20 years. And he just found out this too. So it's really interesting because as humans, we have, these shared experiences. We often say, imagine you're at a beach. But for each of us, imagining that we're at a beach could be very different. So I would picture myself in the sand. I can see the ocean. I can hear the waves. But my husband, he doesn't hear anything in his mind. So what does he imagine? And my good friend, she doesn't see anything. So what does imagining she's at a beach look for her? Like, what does that look like? There was a really interesting chart that we saw online, and it has several apples lined up. The first apple is very realistic. The second one is a little bit more flat. The third one is a little bit blurry. The fourth one is just an outline, and the fifth one is nothing. I'm the first one. I can imagine a very detailed, realistic apple. My husband said he's a mix of the second and the fourth one. So kind of like two-dimensional and maybe, or just an outline of an apple. My friend can't see anything, but we wouldn't have known this unless we saw this picture and talked about it. Isn't it fascinating? We talk like we all have the same way of imagining things and thinking about things, but in reality, there are so many variations, and we each have our own way of thinking, our own way of imagining things, remembering things. And before I recorded this podcast, I wanted to do a little research on it. So I looked up some information, and this is like a very new thing. There isn't much research that has been done on this. Researchers don't fully understand why some people don't have that inner voice. And in 2019, there was some research done. So there seems to be some kind of association between the dorsal pathway and inner speech. And I guess the dorsal and ventral streams are the language tracks in your brain. So depending on how they mature, depends if you have an inner voice or not. So they're the things that are involved in auditory and visual processing. So if those pathways aren't fully matured, you might not be able to have an inner voice. You might not be able to see images in your mind. if you're curious, the name is Aphantasia. Aphantasia means you can't see anything in your mind. And I'm not sure if there's a specific word for not being able to hear anything in your mind, but I'm doing some research on the fly right now, and it seems that only between 30 and 50% of people have an internal monologue. I'm so confused because I have an internal monologue every day. So every time I'm thinking, I don't necessarily hear myself thinking, but like especially if I read something, I hear it in my voice. I can't read something and not hear my voice. I can think and not hear my voice. Like I think maybe in concepts a little bit, but generally I hear my voice. Like if I'm kind of just daydreaming or something, I might not hear, I might just see images. But if I'm thinking, like if I'm making a grocery list or I'm thinking like what I need to do for the day, I definitely hear my voice in my head talking, which is very interesting. I guess only 30 to 50% of the population does this. So please, I'm sure some of you listening don't have an internal monologue. So please try your best to explain what you experience when you think. Like when you read a book or when you remember someone's voice or when you read a letter from someone or anything like that. Please do your best in English to explain how you're thinking, because I'm very, very curious. So I'm just going to look up how many people see images in their mind. Okay, this makes more sense to me. Apparently, only 3% of people in the world have aphantasia. So not being able to see something, not being able to visualize something in your mind is a lot less common. So the majority of us can see things in our mind. So wow, my friend who can't visualize things, she is in the 3%. Wow. What's also interesting is I just saw a video by a girl. I think she has maybe a form of autism, and she's very intelligent. And she was in elementary school, and her teachers were telling her mom that she was special. She was gifted. The regular class seems way too easy for her. You should put her in a higher level. You should put her into the gifted program. So her mom had her take a test, and she did geometry. And the girl finished the test thinking, wow, that was really easy. And she was an elementary school student, and she scored a 99% on geometry, even though she had never taken geometry before. I know geometry is really hard for me. I don't know about you guys, but geometry is a challenge. And this little girl scored 99% on a test for geometry. And she said it's because she can see 3D shapes in her mind. So she can easily visualize the problems. She can imagine in her mind these 3D shapes and be able to calculate the angles and all of that. I thought that was wild because I can see things in my mind, but not to that extent. So there's no way I would be able to see these 3D shapes in a way that I could calculate something from them. So that's just another example of how we can say, imagine a square, imagine a cube. I can do that, but that girl imagines it in a different way. I'm sure all of us are imagining something different. Even though we all know what a cube is, we're probably all seeing something different in our mind. Isn't that interesting? I just thought this was an interesting topic and I wanted to share it with you guys. I talked a little bit fast in this podcast. I got some feedback and people said I talked too slow in the previous podcasts. So I know for some students, talking slowly is very helpful, but for other students, they want a more natural speed. So this is my natural speed, and when I get excited, I also talk really fast. So please give me your feedback. Let me know. Do you like it slower? Do you like it faster? Let me know. I'll try to adjust. I know I can't make everyone happy, but I'll try to meet you somewhere in the middle. Okay, I'm so excited to read the comments after this video is posted because I'm really excited. I want to know how you guys experience the world. I have students from all over the world, from all different countries. So there's got to be some of us who have aphantasia or who can't hear things in their mind. So please, share your experiences, share your thoughts, and I will see you in our next podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'll catch you next time. Bye.